A decade after the Supreme Court's landmark Obergefell decision extending the right to marriage to same-sex couples across the country, the Supreme Court could soon consider whether to take up a case asking them to overturn it. Joining us now to discuss is Tom Dupree. He served as the Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Bush administration and is a constitutional law attorney. So if you would, Tom, just to start off here, can you explain to our viewers who this petitioner is in this case, what her argument is for overturning the ruling that granted same-sex couples the right to marry nationwide, and why that is so significant here?
Sure. Well, the person involved is Kim Davis, and she's a clerk in Kentucky who basically disagreed with the Supreme Court's decision legalizing same-sex marriage and essentially refused to comply with what the Supreme Court said. In other words, she wouldn't issue same-sex marriage certificates and that sort of thing. So there was a lawsuit involving that. She lost the lawsuit. She is now asking the United States Supreme Court to get involved and hear her case. And she's asked the court to reconsider the Obergefell decision. That's the one that legalized same-sex marriage, and invited the court to take her case and reverse that decision.
What is the likelihood that the High Court would take this up?
I think it's unlikely. Anyone can ask the Supreme Court to take their case, but the Supreme Court actually takes very few of the cases that it's presented with. Here, I think it's unlikely they're going to take it. There certainly are some justices who I think would vote to overrule the same-sex marriage decision. Justice Thomas, for example, has been very upfront about he thinks it was wrongly decided and should be reversed. I suspect Justice Alito feels the same way. There are also other conservative justices who may not be big fans of that decision, but I think it's quite another step to say that they're going to take this case and reverse the decision. I think the likelier outcome is they'll take a pass on this case and possibly revisit this issue in future years.
All right, so I want to read part of the argument from Davis's attorney. He writes, "This court should revisit and reverse Obergefell for the same reasons articulated in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Center. Obergefell was wrong when it was decided, and it is wrong today because it was grounded entirely on the legal fiction of substantive due process." What do you make of that argument?
Well, I think if you are trying to get the Supreme Court interested in taking this case, that's probably the right way to frame the argument. The case that he's talking about, the Dobbs decision, as you know, that was the one where the Supreme Court reversed Roe versus Wade. And they basically said that Roe versus Wade, which recognized the right to abortion, rested on this concept of substantive due process, that the Constitution basically gave you a substantive right to choose an abortion. The Obergefell decision, the same-sex marriage decision, was also grounded in this concept of substantive due process. So what they are saying is that the same logic, the same rationale that led you to reverse Roe versus Wade should apply equally here and should also lead you to overrule the same-sex marriage decision.
And after the Dobbs decision, as we know, one Supreme Court Justice, Clarence Thomas, had this call to revisit the Obergefell case. Tell us more about your thinking there. Do you think that there are other justices who could be on the same page as him? If so, which ones?
I think there are other justices who, if they were deciding the same-sex marriage question today, writing on a blank slate, might well say the Constitution does not protect same-sex marriage. Certainly Justice Alito feels that way. Obviously, Justice Thomas feels that way. Chief Justice Roberts, I think, probably feels that way. He was one of the dissenters in the original Obergefell case. It's possible that the other justices, some of the conservatives, including Justices Kavanaugh, Justice Barrett, Justice Gorsuch, possibly, they may also disagree with the rationale. But to my mind, there's a big difference between disagreeing with the outcome in that case and being poised to overrule it. There's that concept of stare decisis, that if a Supreme Court decides a case, you let it rest on the books in place unless there are incredibly compelling reasons to revisit it. And there may be conservative justices who aren't the biggest fans of substantive due process, but they're not poised to overrule the same-sex marriage case so soon after it was decided.
What is your message to families who see these headlines about the fate of same-sex marriage and worry their own marriages, both past and future, could be invalidated?
Well, I totally understand how it could be disconcerting, to say the least, to see your rights or something that appeared, at least a few years ago, to be well settled constitutional law being revisited or at least questioned from some quarters. But I would say a few things. One is that the likelihood of the Supreme Court taking this case and reversing Obergefell, I think, is unlikely at this point for the reasons we've discussed. The other thing is that Congress also passed a law that basically would make any situation where this decision gets reversed apply prospectively only. So even if the Supreme Court were to take this case, reject same sex marriage, that wouldn't automatically have the effect of invalidating marriages that are already on the books, but it was something that would only apply going forward.
All right, Tom Dupree, thank you so much.